This public fracture underscores why it has been so critical for NATO and Ukraine to collectively define victory in the public imagination, as well as, most importantly, in the Ukrainian imagination. And I've been saying this for 2 years. I said it to Joe Biden. I'm saying it to Donald Trump. So it's not partisan. It's policy. We need to define victory. And that's 3 things. 1, it's a secure eastern border. 2, it's freedom of navigation in the Black Sea. And 3, it's Ukrainian accession to the European Union. You deliver those 3 things, you have a sovereign, prosperous, democratic Ukraine. That's a victory.
Okay. Does that sound like something that President Trump can accomplish on Friday?
No. What he could accomplish on Friday would be to issue an ultimatum to Vladimir Putin that Putin must release the kidnapped Ukrainian children as a good faith beginning to negotiations. There will be no deal in this summit. But Vladimir Putin's release of Ukrainian children who have been kidnapped and held in captivity, held under false premises, would, I think, be a good faith marker towards what could be productive negotiations around that definition of victory.
Well, there have been a lot of questions about why we're the host nation here, beyond why these talks are even happening at all. Even in the pursuit of peace, typically there are agreements that are made. There's a framework before the 2 leaders sit down at the table, so you don't have any major surprises. The idea of having Vladimir Putin on American soil, presumably, and you can tell me if you know differently, on an American military base, this is going to be somewhere in Alaska, I don't know what the facility will be, has been compared with, for instance, yourself having served in Afghanistan, where you led an infantry patrol, almost like George W. Bush hosting Osama bin Laden for peace talks. Am I going too far with this, Congressman? How do you see it?
You're addressing what is Donald Trump's approach to most foreign policy issues, which is that he's all show horse, no workhorse. He doesn't want to actually do the hard work of mid-level and high-level negotiations between officials that would preface a principles-level meeting between the presidents. He doesn't want to do that work. He wants a photo op. He wants to wine and dine Vladimir Putin because he has always sought Vladimir Putin's approval. It's like this weird fanboy thing that he has. And nothing's going to come of it. And it's going to further erode America's geopolitical standing when we need to be spending that political capital on appropriating Russian frozen assets in Brussels and taking that 300 billion euros and sending it to Ukraine to strengthen their military-industrial complex, on getting Ukraine to join the European Union's Lisbon Treaty's collective defense article, on authorizing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike Russia, on tightening oil price caps on Russian exports. All of these things that are geopolitically achievable but intensive, those are the hard work that Donald Trump is not doing that could have actually made a summit productive. Instead, it's going to be, yet another sizzle without the steak.
Well, he did at one point, I think, want to invite or suggested inviting the Taliban to Camp David. What should be the parameters then for this meeting? Should it be on a military base? Should these guys put 2 chairs out on the runway and talk this out? Because if it's nothing more than a photo op, why should he enjoy the hospitality of the United States?
Yeah, I'm not a protocol officer. I'm not getting into the details on that because it doesn't matter, because it's not going to actually achieve the outcomes that we want. The outcome that I want from this poorly conceived summit, the only achievable outcome here would be an ultimatum about releasing the kidnapped Ukrainian children as a beginning, not as a conclusion to negotiations.
Okay, that's a good answer. Congressman, I'd like to ask you, as a former member of the House China Select Committee, about some of the headlines we've been hearing about trade with China. The president has allowed another 90 days for talks to continue, and has now made an arrangement with Nvidia and AMD, 2 of the most important American companies, never mind important chip makers, to give 15% of their sales of AI chips to China to the U.S. government. It's been called unprecedented. I don't know if you see it that way. I don't know where the money is going. We haven't heard that either. But is that the cost of doing business?
My one question is, how many Trump meme coins does NVIDIA's senior leadership own? Because that kind of deal is so grotesquely inappropriate and contrary, 1, to the interests of NVIDIA, and 2, to American interests, that I just have to question whether they're buying Trump coins on the side. Because we know that the Trump coin allows foreign officials and senior executives at corporations to buy influence with the president anonymously but securely. And I question whether they've bought those Trump coins, because this deal is hugely inappropriate. It basically makes the federal government a co-partner in helping China leapfrog us on AI.
Wow. You could also suggest that the government is now going to be invested in the chip industry. And you could also ask shareholders who bought stock in companies like Nvidia and AMD if they're comfortable with the government getting 15% of the revenue that they may have factored into the stock price, Congressman. Will there be oversight from Congress here?
There should be. Republicans will say one thing in private and do nothing in public, as is their norm, because this, as I said, is one, I think, a violation of Nvidia's fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, but also grossly inappropriate for the American public. Why would we be helping to equip China to surpass us in AI? We did the CHIPS Act. We made investments in the semiconductor industry, which I voted for, which was bipartisan, precisely so that we would have the lead. And this deal makes me shudder to consider what a TikTok deal might look like, what an ultimate tariff deal might look like. And again, orbiting around these considerations is who is buying the Trump coin? This is the central issue of corruption of his first year in office. More than half of his net worth is tied up in this coin. We have no idea who owns it. The people who showed up at the White House for this crypto dinner, those are just the ones who want to be seen. The Qataris, the Turks, the Venezuelans, the Chinese, they probably didn't want to be seen. We don't know who's bought him.
Okay, you've brought this up a couple times, and this is serious, Congressman. How do you find out?
Well, Senator Warren and I have asked both the SEC and the Treasury to investigate. They're not. Ultimately, this is going to have to be when Democrats take back control of the House and hopefully the Senate, and we can do subpoenas and investigations without having to be obstructed by the cowardice of congressional Republicans, because congressional Republicans have made clear that they're courtiers, they're not members of Congress, and they don't want to hold them to account for what is the most grotesque example of corruption that this president has yet exhibited. And I understand how high of a bar that is, but I'm standing by it.
Wow. So if Democrats take the House, prepare for an investigation into the Trump coin, I think is what we've learned. Congressman, we've got a minute left. Do you expect a deal with China? We've got another 90 days. Is that enough to do it?
I doubt it in 90 days. Let me say one thing more to the point, though, about this back and forth with China. What he has done is he has bundled in fentanyl, tariffs, TikTok into one giant sort of performative set of negotiations. It's a mistake. There is bipartisan support in Congress and legislation that I've helped draft with Republicans on getting much tougher on China for fentanyl. China exports about 98% of fentanyl precursors. That issue needs to be addressed right now on its own merits, because it's unacceptable that China is directing state-sponsored poisoning of the American public, 70,000 deaths every year from opioid overdoses. Tackle that. Don't tie it into TikTok and tariffs.